So I saw Captain Marvel, and yeah, it was pretty bad. Part of me feels really disappointed because I really wanted to like this movie. There's a lot of potential to make a good movie out of this, and I was really hoping they would. But on the other hand, I'm really pleasantly surprised because it was not nearly as bad as the trailers or promos made it out to be. However, not as bad does not equal good. This movie isn't incompetent per se. There are a few things I did really like. The main thing I like about this movie is the pacing. It never dragged on, and I actually felt like it went by pretty quickly. That was probably the best aspect to the entire movie. The cinematography, while mostly bland, was on the odd occasion actually pretty great. There were only a couple of shots that stood out as exceptionally bad, and there were quite a few shots that I actually did love. The acting was fairly good from some of the players in this film. Samuel L. Jackson did a pretty good job as expected. Lashana Lynch was pretty good. There wasn't really any spectacular performances per se, but there were some good ones like them, so yeah. And while I do consider this to be a bad movie, it's pretty watchable. Quite honestly, for most of the movie, it is riding on just kind of bad, but close to being average enough. Quite honestly, I could have given this movie a 5 had it kept the same pace kinda going, but the final act of this movie is legitimately atrocious. It isn't interesting enough to devote a spoiler talk to or anything, and nothing in this movie really is, but trust me when I say that towards the last 20 to 25 minutes of this movie, it just becomes such a mess. However, for now, let's just tackle the issues that are present throughout all of the movie. First off, Brie Larson is not a very good Captain Marvel at all. I have no doubt in my mind she's a very talented actress, and I honestly had higher hopes for her in this movie, but really, she is just not good in this role at all. She was completely unconvincing, and her line delivery was often flat. She wasn't awful in every scene or anything, and this is definitely not one of the worst performances I've ever seen, but she just did not do a good job with this character whatsoever. And the same could be said for Jude Law and Ben Mendelsohn. Some of the acting in this movie is really unconvincing and bad. I mentioned that there were some great shots in this movie, and for the most part the cinematography was bland, but when the movie looked bad, it looked bad. There's some scenes with color grading that are trying to make it greeny yellow, and they're legitimately ugly to look at. Some of the framing choices were very questionable and bad, and combined with the messy editing, this film was just kind of annoying to watch at some points. I remember when that train sequence thing came out and everyone was like, oh, that's badly edited, but that is not what the movie is going to be like. Well, let me tell you now, that is exactly what it is like in the movie. There is one action scene towards the end of the movie that is so poorly shot and edited that I legitimately had trouble figuring out what was happening. The action was occasionally fun, but it was never intentional fun. It always felt unintentionally funny whenever it was enjoyable, and for the most part it was just very uninspired choreography. Most of the action in this movie was a CGI overload, and most of the CGI was bad. I was legitimately surprised at how fake and terrible this movie looked. It was genuinely embarrassing at points. The score used a lot of electronic music and it was really annoying and distracting. You could probably blame this part on the comics, but I did not like the costume design in this movie at all. Add on the fact that the makeup jobs were not very well done either, and it was just kind of really poorly done. The writing in this movie was not very good, the characters aren't very interesting, the story is predictable and paint by numbers. The comedy did work every now and then, but it also didn't work every now and then. There's twists in this movie, and they're all the most predictable things ever expected. I mean, yeah, I could go into spoiler talk, but again, it is nowhere near interesting enough. And there is one thing about this movie that is super dumb, and I'm almost tempted to go into spoiler talk for it, but I don't really feel like giving it time's worth. So yeah, there's something that happens in this movie that is canon to the MCU now, and it is absolutely abysmal. There's some attempts at subplots that try to characterize the characters in this movie, but they are so rushed and shoved in that they have zero effect whatsoever. Again, I would like to note that this film is not terrible or anything, but towards the end it just becomes so unbearably bad. It could have been a 5, It could have been a 4, but this film just nosedives in the last 20 to 25 minutes. The acting reaches an all-time low, the characters are at their absolute worst, the action is at its absolute worst, the comedy is all completely unfunny, the dialogue is absolutely unbearable, the music is atrocious. It just gets really, really bad towards the climax. It's like Wonder Woman, but if Wonder Woman started off bad. It's very clear everyone involved in this movie was trying their best, but the effort just did not pay off. Despite the fact that there is some good acting, some good cinematography, and a few nice details that I did notice, there is just not enough positives to weigh out. This film is watchable, it's not unbearable, I wouldn't say definitely don't see it. If you think you want to see this movie, and if you think you'll like it, then you'll probably like it. If you want to see this movie just because you like watching everything in the MCU, then go right ahead. If you want to watch an awesome female-led action blockbuster, maybe just go watch Alita Battle Angel again, because this one is not really worth your time. I don't know if I'd recommend or not recommend this. It wasn't the worst thing ever. It wasn't very good. It's still a bad movie, and I don't really know what else to say about it. I'm gonna give Captain Marvel a 3 out of 10. That's the end of the video. Like, share, subscribe. I'm bad at outros, and I'll see you in whatever I do next.